The Powers Project.
Steve, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Kurt. Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I love the Powers Project. I'm looking forward to being part of it.
Well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to this as well. As because of things happening, we had to change our date a few times, and I was like, I
Yes.
really want to have him on the show because I really enjoyed talking to you. You know, when we first met, and I was like,
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to this. So, besides what you do, as I told you, this is a sharp dressed man right here.
Yes. Yeah, I'm kind of dressed down today, actually. I don't
Yeah,
know. It's just today was just that flavor today. I kind of casual chic day.
right, exactly. But I'm going to tell you, I like your style, and it's not that I don't, I've had amazing guests on here who are very well dressed. It's just that I particularly like your style. It's like, I like to say it's a style of a winner because I like the styles of winners, and so
Indeed. That's right. That's right. That's right. And if you like my style, you are a winner.
yeah,
I'll
exactly,
proclaim it right here for everybody. You are definitely a winner.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So when you go on his social media or go on his website and see how he dresses, you're gonna go, "Oh, that's a sharp looking man right there." So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And like I told you, man, I got that from Grandpa. I literally grew up with my grandfather, and he was the guy. He was the guy that dressed in like the full suit with the fedora and the trench coat. I still dress like that. People look at me like I'm old, but it is what it is, man. That's my style. That's how men dress.
I didn't tell you I have a fedora as well. And I
Of
went
course.
after you and I talked, I went and pulled it out of the closet and I had to dust it off. 'Cause I
I
go,
love
I
it.
need to wear this.
That's right, man. You got to wear it. You got to bring it out. Let the sun shine in. To let
Here's
people see it, man.
exactly. But here's the problem. God only made a few men with perfect heads, and those are us. So I hate
That's
covering it
right.
up. So
That's right. That's right. Ball brothers unite.
exactly.
Absolutely.
So let me tell people what you do real quick. You are an
Sure.
author of a book called Broadcast Your Inner Champion. You're a motivational speaker, a thought leader, and a life coach. And so, talking about clothes, how much effect do you think clothes have on the man or the woman, even for that matter? I mean,
Wow, that's a great question, Kurt. And it's interesting. It's one of those old things. Like I said, I grew up with my grandparents, right? We're talking, a man and woman born in the 19 teens, right?
right,
So they have all these old sayings, and they always would say the clothes make the man,
right,
right? And as a kid, I didn't get that. I didn't understand it. But I'll tell you, the first day I realized how much clothes impact the way people see you was the day I came home from boot camp in the Army. Huh, to all those veterans out there.
yeah,
I came home. I grew up in the Bronx, right? So I'm coming home to the Bronx. They all knew me as this little kid, little snot nosed kid running around the streets playing tag all day. And then one day I come home in full dress uniforms, right? U.S. Army. And it was amazing, Kurt, because like this, the older men on the neighborhood. If you grew up in neighborhoods like mine, you always knew those old dudes that sat on the corner like all
right,
day. They knew everybody in the neighborhood, pops. Everybody called them pops, right? So, sure enough, like all of the older men in the neighborhood like stood up from their chairs as they saw me coming and was like, hey, sir, good afternoon, sir. Literally calling me sir. As a young man, I was 21 years old at the time, and it was amazing seeing just the look in their eye when they saw me, the respect they had for me. And it was just because of what I was wearing. And Jill Sergeant Herndon would tell you it was because of how I was carrying myself, right? And how he taught me to carry myself. Because what I find is that when you're dressed sharp, you start thinking sharp, right? You perceive yourself to be sharp and you project that, right? It's amazing how clothing can really give you confidence in how you see yourself and how you project yourself, and people pick up on that. It absolutely amazes me. And the reverse is true as well. If you dress down, you dress bummy, and you're feeling bummy and slummy, that's how people will perceive you. That's how they'll treat you. Now that's not, there are exceptions to that, of course, like every rule.
right.
But I find the better you dress, the better you feel, man.
I I agree with you 100%, and I think honestly that's part of the challenge that we have nowadays is that people don't dress up anymore, and it's not just to your point that it's not just how people perceive you and respect you more. It's how you carry yourself when you're dressed sharp. Like you said, you think sharp. You walk with a different gait. You hold your head up high because you know you look sharp. And then what happens is you start respecting yourself more. you I find it hard to believe that people who walk out and, outside and go to Walmart in their pajamas have a lot of respect for themselves. It's like, and I find,
Right.
if you people get lazy and they think it's okay to do that, and they're harming. I think they hurt themselves as far as their self-worth and things
Yes.
of that nature. So that's why when I see you dressed the way you do, when I see Dr. Dennis Kimbrough dressed the way he does, and all the other successful people I've had on my show, I go, there's something to this.
Absolutely. And what's really, you're making me think of this memory. I hadn't thought of this in a while, but I actually I went to, imagine I'm a 14-year-old kid from the South Bronx. I wound up going to this prep school, right? Phillips Academy, Andover, just north of Boston. And there is a flip side to this. One of the things I did notice with that was that with the richer kids at the school, because most of these kids could, they had like trust funds to like buy the school if they wanted
Right.
to. The interesting thing about that too was that the richer kids on the campus, they tended to dress down, right?
Right.
And not necessarily bummy or badly dressed, but they dressed down, right? Very plain. Whereas it was funny, like some of the kids were not rich like me. We tended to dress like more flamboyantly, and I don't
Right.
know what that's about. But the crazy thing is what I learned from that is there is a balance to strike, right? You don't have to prove anything through your attire,
Right.
but the way you dress does reflect your own mindset, right? And I think as long as you have that balance, that you're not really trying to prove anything, you're just literally trying to reflect your own sense of purpose and sense of worth. I think people will respond to that.
That's a great point, because there are people who dress to impress and not for the right reason. Like
Yes.
the ones who try to dress to impress are the ones who always wear these double-breasted jackets that went out of style 30 years ago, and
30.
exactly. And
Yes.
it's like you're trying to show off now, and that's not what dressing up means. It means to have
Yeah.
respect for yourself, to respect others. It doesn't mean you're better than anyone else, and you're not trying to put that out there that you're better than anyone else. But then you do have those people who do dress like they're billionaires, or so, or
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
idea of what a billionaire dresses
Right,
like.
right, exactly. Right. I have to have this like, $8 million, Rolex watch on my wrist with
Right.
like 50 diamonds on it. It's fun. It's funny. You just brought up another memory. I remember it was when I was a teenager coming home, I think, from school. And I remember being dropped off at the airport, and I see this guy. The thing about it was he was a younger man. He was like maybe 30. He had on just a plain white button-down shirt. He had on plain jeans, nothing fancy. And he had this watch, and it was just a plain gold watch, but you could tell the quality of the watch by looking at it. And he had just one plain. He had those old. Let's tell you how long ago this was. He had one of those bracelets, the name bracelets, like with the initials on it, and
Mhm.
very old style bracelet with just the plate and then just the links. And the thing is, it was very plain. There were no diamonds on it or anything like that, but you could tell it was solid gold. Like it wasn't hollow at all. You could tell the quality of it. And I said, you know what? I love that. I want to dress like that. Everything about him was plain, but quality. And you could just see the quality. He just exuded
Right.
quality, right? And all he had on was a shirt and some jeans, but you could just see the quality in it. And again, I think that's it speaks to your point. It's not about impressing anyone. It's just about reflecting your own quality and sense of worth.
Absolutely. I'll let me just tell you a quick story here. I always say that people who try to impress you are wannabes, and like working out in the gym, there were guys like me. We had that we were big, we were strong. We never, none of us ever wore tight shirts. The only people who wore tight shirts were the ones who had a little muscle, trying to pretend that they had a lot of muscle. And it was always funny to watch these guys walk around with, with small shirts on when they should be wearing a medium, and trying to look bigger.
Medium.
And the same thing
Right.
happens
Medium,
with rich people. I happened to date a girl one time. Her father was a multimillionaire, but but the people he was in contact with were so wealthy they made him look like a pauper. Like they were, they owned the train tracks. They had old money. And I remember one time they had this old couple over for dinner, and I remember my girlfriend saying they have so much money that God could borrow from them, something to that effect. But when you looked at them, he drove this old car that he probably had his whole life. It was like from the 1950s. Him and his wife were dressed in older clothes, but they were very well kept up and stuff. They had no, very minimum jewelry, and just like if you saw them on the street, you would go, "Oh, that's a nice old couple." You wouldn't know that they could buy you in the town that you live in, sort of thing.
Yep.
And
Right.
and yet I find it funny that people have a little money, or like people who have a little muscle. They want to show off, so they go buy the Lamborghinis, they go buy the gold necklaces and the Rolex.
Right.
And these people who could buy anything, they go, I don't need that stuff, because they don't need to impress anyone, because they know who they are. And I think that's what happens, that when we know who we are, we don't need to show up. That's why that whole saying, like, if you have to say you're an alpha male, you're not an alpha male. It's like,
Exactly. Exactly. Kurt, it's so funny. I need to hire you, man, as like an ad campaign manager for me. It's so quick because that actually is the focus of what I do as a life coach. That question, who are you? That's actually the very first question I ask all of my clients, because I am convinced that the only way to be successful in life is to answer that question fully. People get caught up in trying to, figure out, well, what kind of career do I want? Or, I'm having trouble with these relationships. And they keep trying to jump right into the solutions to those issues. But I always tell my clients, those aren't the real issues. Those are just the symptoms. The real issue is, who are you, and do you know who you are? And it's funny, you just laid that out perfectly, man. I need to talk to you about being a spokesperson or something.
I was going to say, we will definitely talk after the show, because I'm in line with you about that. Like, you have got to, I always say this, you have to know who you are, and you have to be honest about it. Don't lie to yourself, because when you lie to yourself, you lie to everybody, and you're not being yourself. You're trying to be what you think other people want you to be. Now, how do I know that? Because I lived the first half of my life like that, being someone other than myself to please other people, and I would never go back to doing that ever again. So you're absolutely, that's such an important question, and people don't, like you said, they don't ask the right questions. Like, they do what they think they're supposed to do, sort of thing.
Right. That's right. Absolutely right.
So basically, what you do is you help people discover their why, like why they want to do something, which is very important, is to because if you don't have the right answers, then you're going down the wrong path, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, another premise of what I do with Broadcasting Your Champion is this whole idea, and it's funny, I wrote about this in my book. I have come to understand that you don't spend this life trying to discover who you are. You actually spend this life remembering that you actually have always been your authentic self from the time you were born, and depending on your spiritual walk, which is a whole nother conversation, even before that, right? And so the whole point of that is that you have to rediscover, you have to remember what your passions are, what your purpose is. And it's funny, I'll give free advice here. The way you discover what your purpose is you have to look at what are your natural skills. And all of us have them, right? All of us have natural skills. Some of us are really good at talking, right? Like you and I, right? Some of us are good at math, right? Some of us are just good at figuring out puzzles and problems. All of us have unique skills. And I tell my clients all the time that don't ignore that. the way you discover your purpose and the way you answer all those other side issues, like what career I should have, who are the people I should have in my life, what relationships I should have. But the way you get to all of that is you discover your purpose by examining your skills, the things that you just naturally do well, the things that you love doing that you wouldn't even want payment for if money was not an object, right? And those skills are the clue to why you're here. And that's what I mean about discovering who am I, right? Really answering that question. And when you start doing that kind of fundamental work, and really discovering, hey, these are my skills, and I know that my purpose is about using these skills, right, for the benefit of myself, my family, and for those around me. When you are on that vibe and on that level of thinking, it's amazing how things like what career I should have, right? Or I'm not happy with my job and I really want to do something that makes me happy. How all of that stuff kind of falls into place like a puzzle, right? When you do that fundamental work. And the reason why I think, again, most of us are so challenged with that and frustrated and angry, and we go through life, banging our head against the wall, feeling stuck, is because we haven't done the work we're supposed to do.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, because I'm sure you've run into people like this. I know I'm not an exception to the rule. If anything, I'm the norm. We met through Robert, right? Robert B. Foster.
Yes, Robert Foster. Yes,
all right,
sir.
so I took Robert Foster's course, and he helps you define your story. Now, he did something for me that I wasn't able to do for myself. And so this is where I say, look, folks, if you need to talk to Robert Foster first, get your story, and then come see Steve Berlack and know what to do with that story, that's what you should do. It's okay to use more than one coach as long as they're on the same page with things. And what Robert did for me was he asked questions where I go, what in the world is he asking this question for? But I answered it like I really, had real intentions to answer it properly. And when I was done, I figured out what my story was and what I was meant to do. Because you'll run into people who have many talents and it paralyzes them. It's like, I might be a good speaker, I might be a good singer, I might be a good athlete. I go, and which one do I might be a good musician. Like, what path do I want? And you go, well, I'd like to do them all. I think it'd be great to be a singer. I think it'd be great to play in NFL. I think you have all these ideas, and then you go, I don't know which one to pick, and then you don't pick any of them. So when you run into someone like that, how do you get them to discover what is most important to them?
Great question. And it's interesting because a lot of people are like that, right? We don't all have just one skill, we have multiple, right? I was like that. You'd asked me that as a kid, I would have told you I have no idea what I want to do, right? So when I work with clients, and they talk to me about having different interests and different skills, it's just a matter of walking that back, right? Remember, I said, knowing who you are is about remembering. You always were this person. And so I just walk them back, right? Okay, you have these 5 skills. Which of them would you do for free? Now that may eliminate some of them, right? Would you do that for free? Would you do this for free? No, I would do this for free, do that for free. I mean, if money were no object, you would do it for free just because you love it that much, right? Because it's not just about what skill you have, it's about your passion, right? Do you have a passion for doing this work? Because some people are really skilled mechanics, they just don't like doing it. My mom was a really good cook, but she didn't like cooking, right? So it just wasn't her passion. So that wasn't why she was here, right? Although I would say as her son that one of the main reasons she was there was because I was here, right? But that's a whole nother, I learned that is not quite true, right? She was her own person, the nerve of her, right? Being her own person besides my mom, right? So again, what I would do is I would try to fit their passion with their skills and try to get them to prioritize. There's the key word, right? Prioritize. Where does your passion lie? So when you marry your passion and your skills, you found your purpose, right? So it's just a matter of looking at all the skills, and the key is there's no wrong answer, right? There's no right or wrong answer to that. It really is just about working with my clients to get them to understand how do you marry what you're passionate about with your skill? And then how do we find the work that's out there that encompasses that? And that takes work, because then it's about researching, and, and I help them with that, right? Looking at what's out there that encompasses that, right? Some people know what their passion is, they know what their skill is, and they have no idea what work fits that. Right. And I help them with that. So let's explore that. What's out there? Let's do the research. And we're in a golden age for doing stuff like that. Google is your friend. Right?
Yeah.
So, with the internet, I mean, we're at a golden age. We can literally discover things at our fingertips. Right. And I help my clients do just that, especially since a lot, most of my work now, especially with the pandemic, is online, one-on-one coaching online. And so since we're online, we can literally work together online and do that sort of work to find where their passion lies, particularly those that are interested, focused on their career, their work, relationships. I would submit that it's the same thing with relationships, even with people, right? It's very much the same sort of work, right? You might have a passion for someone, but it's not the right person for you.
Right.
And that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, is this somebody that you can live your life with, right? Even though they're flawed, like the nerve of them, right? Being flawed. And it's funny, people talk about, well, I can't stand this. She does this and she does that. I was like, well, the nerve of her, she's flawed,
Right.
just like everybody else walking on the planet, including you and me, as a matter of fact, right? The question is, are those flaws something that you can live with? And there is no right or wrong answer. If the answer to you is no, then you know what to do with this relationship. If the answer is yes, I do think that I can work with this, then I explore, okay, well, how can we work with it? Let's take some steps to figure out what we can do, right, to work with that. And so again, it's just a matter of marrying your passion and your skill. And that's a great point. You have to do both. It can't be just your skill, because there are a lot of people that are on jobs that they're skilled at, and they are really frustrated and upset, and can't figure out where they need to go. And it's funny, my clients have either one of two issues. I found either they're unhappy and they don't know what they want to do. They don't know why they're unhappy, and they don't know what their passion is or their skills, or they know what their skills are. They know what they want to do, but they feel stuck, right? Because they have family telling them, hey, listen, you have obligations. You need to keep this job that you can't stand because you have family and you have children. And, who cares if you're miserable for the rest of your life? Like, who cares, right? You got to do this. And there are people that live their lives miserable in that way. And so they're stuck. They don't know how to get to the life they see in their mind. And the more, it's funny, there's a movie, It's a Wonderful Life, actually explores that. If you've ever seen that movie, where he has all these dreams about what he wants to do, but he feels these family obligations, including pressure, friendly pressure from his dad to take over the family business, and he doesn't want to do it, and he feels continuously frustrated because of this pressure. And a lot of people understand that and feel that and go through that. And so I help them actually figure out how to get there. And again, it all boils down to, knowing who you are so that you can make the right connections to the right people.
That's such a great point, because money's not going to make you happy. I have a dear friend of mine who's very wealthy. He and his father had built this paper business of theirs, and had done very well. But he was traveling all the time, and he made a great living and provided for his family, his kids and his wife, and beautiful home, everything. And after his kids grew up and graduated from college, he's like, I'm not going to do this anymore, because I don't have to and I don't want to. And his wife didn't understand that. And it's like, it was killing him. Like, it was literally killing him. And he's like, if I stay in this, I'm going to die. And I don't want that to happen, obviously. And so, I commend him, because he had to, he's like, I fulfilled my duties. I'm going to do what I want to do now. And he stepped away from the business. I mean, he just stepped away from it. He didn't want it anymore in any capacity. And so it takes a lot of courage, even later on in life. It takes a lot of courage to do that when you're used to a really great income, and just walk away from it. And yet he did. And now I mean, the guy is so happy, it's beyond belief, and that means more than all the money in the world. And and if you don't believe that, ask someone who has all the money in the world and isn't happy. The same way with health. I tell people the richest man in the world would give every penny to get his health back if he was unhealthy, because without that,
Right.
you have nothing.
That's right. That's right. Because you're not taking any of that with you.
Right.
And it's funny because the more unhealthy you are, the more you start thinking about that kind of stuff. Right. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah, I built all this. Now what? Right. Like, now
Right.
what? Oh, I'm going to leave it to, some kids who can't stand me anyway. They're waiting for me to die. And we laugh at that, but that's real.
Yeah, that
There are
is
kids
real.
out there waiting for their parents to die. Like, like we just looking at, yeah, they're gonna be dying any minute now.
Right.
And there are literally families like that,
Fortunately,
or
right.
that, even kids that have taken that next step and taken their dad or their mom out, right, so that they could get that money.
Oh
I mean,
yes.
that's
Yep.
real.
Absolutely. Fortunately for my friend, he has two great kids. I mean, they're just like just the greatest kids you'd ever want to meet, and they are very successful. Are just so he still has a great family unit. They're not wanting him to die, so he's not one of
I
those.
love it. That's
But you're
good.
right.
Yeah,
There
I
are
love it.
people out there
Blessings.
like that. So
Yes, yes. Well, blessings to him because he really has found a blessed life
yeah,
to do that and have the courage to do it. Much love to him.
well, he put his time in as a dad. Like, even though he made a great living, he made sure that he was there for his kids too and his wife, and so he's a good man. So, one of the other things that you do, which is, of course, I think one of the most important parts, is I was talking to a friend last night, and he said, I want to go to Australia. He goes, I have a plan to go to Australia. And I said, what's your plan? He goes, to go to Australia. I go, that's not a plan. That's a goal. I go,
Right, right.
I go,
That's a
how are
wish.
you going to get to Australia is your plan. So,
Right,
and that's
right.
one of the things you do is you help people design a strategy. Once you help them figure out what their why is, then you help them design a strategy of how to get there.
Yes, yes. I actually have what I call the Broadcast Junior Champion Goals Bundle. And it's a series of documents that includes a timeline, right? And so what I do is, so basically, like I said, the beginning of the work is first understanding who you are. So the first module that I explore with my clients is peace of mind through self-awareness, right? And then from there, we go from confidence to power. How do you translate that self-awareness and confidence to power? And once we start exploring that, that's when we start getting into goal setting, because we start talking about networking and we start talking about influence and that kind of thing. And once we start doing that work, I actually introduce to them a goals timeline, the bundle. And basically what I do is I walk through my clients to actually lay out, okay, what are your goals, short term and long term? Right? What are your goals? It's up to them. And then we actually do what's called SMART goals, right? Where you can actually measure the goals and they're very specific and they're time bound, that kind of thing. We learn that, businesses learn, SMART goal, planning, that kind of thing. So for anybody like in business in that environment, the term SMART goal is very familiar, right? So once I actually explain that and walk them through making the goals, so they create their goals and then I actually make them SMART, specific, measurable, right, achievable, timely, and relevant, right? And so once we actually make them SMART goals, and now I have them place them on the calendar. And the key about the calendar is not only do they place the goal itself, but it also has a tool to work through all the steps to get to each individual goal. And so now you have your goals and you have the steps laid out to get to those goals. And then from that calendar, you create your daily to-do list, right? And so at the end of the day, not only am I teaching them about setting goals and achieving them, I'm teaching them about discipline, right? The same discipline I learned, from Joe Sergeant Herndon in the U.S. Army, right? It's funny. As an author, and someone who writes poetry and all that stuff, right? I can be scatterbrained. I can be scattershot. So I use this myself to rein in, my own brain to
Right.
stay focused. And so it's something I use, for myself. And believe me, if I can use it and if it can keep me focused, it can keep any of my clients focused, and it does. And so again, it sets up the discipline to look at their calendar each morning before they begin and actually create a to-do list the night before that they look at in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to accomplish these goals. And here's the key. And I tell my clients this, one of the reasons why people procrastinate is fear, right? They feel this fear of either the pain or, oh, I can't do it, right? I won't make it. And so setting the goals eliminates that fear. Setting the steps in particular helps to eliminate that fear, because it's not this big, huge project anymore. It's just one day and these particular steps. That's all you're doing today. And guess what? You may not even make it through all the steps today. So guess what? That's okay. If you don't, you have to add those steps to tomorrow. And now you have your list for tomorrow, right? And if you don't want to have extra steps tomorrow, stay focused today, right? If you don't make it, it is okay. It just means that you have extra work tomorrow. And it's funny, Dwight D. Eisenhower had a great quote about just this, right? About planning and the importance of planning and why it's important to be flexible and not be stuck in your plan. If you remember, he was the supreme commander during World War II, and in particular for D-Day, right? And anybody that's familiar with D-Day, the plans were very elaborate. They'd studied them for like 2 years, right, on how to actually plan this attack. Of course, everything went haywire, right, which it tends to happen in war, right? Everything went haywire. Nothing went according to plan. People were dropped all over. People were in the wrong places. But because they knew the plan, because they knew where they were trying to get to, they knew their goals and they knew the steps to get there, even though they were off track, the plan helped them figure out how to adjust. Whereas if they didn't have a plan, they wouldn't know what to do. They would just be stuck there, right? And so what I talk to my clients about is having the plan isn't about getting you so tight in your plan that you become immobile, because you didn't finish all the steps. It's not about that. It's about understanding, okay, I did 5 of the 6 steps today. That just means I have an extra step tomorrow. I got to work even harder tomorrow. That's all that means. And right. That means if that means I got to get up a little earlier tomorrow, then guess what? I get up a little earlier tomorrow and I make it happen, right? And so flexibility and discipline are also key to success, as well as knowing who you are. And so setting those goals and the steps really helps my client. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from them about that.
Yeah, I think because that's what happens. Like people, they set a plan and they're so like adamant about that plan that they're not flexible. And one of the things I use as a metaphor, I go, if you wanted to leave from Florida and you wanted to go to Africa and you decide you're going to go on a ship and you go, okay, this is the path we're going to take, but there's a hurricane in the middle. Are you really going to try to go through that hurricane? Or are you going to go, hey, maybe I need to make a left here?
Some people would. That's the crazy thing. Some people be like, look, there's a storm ahead. They're going to the storm. I'm going through it. Right. This is the way we said we're going. I've got to go this way. And there are people like that out there, man. And that's why I'm here. Right. Because those folks come to me and like, no. Let me help you with that. Right. It's funny. I used to be an administrator in Baltimore City Public Schools, man. And I still ask for prayer about that, man. That was work. But we had a saying as administrators in the school system, man, blessed are the flexible. Blessed are the flexible, man. As an administrator in public school system, man, you had to know that your day was not going to work out as you planned it. Period. Yep. It's not seldom work out that way.
Yeah, it seldom does, honestly.
Yes.
What do you do for people like me? who I used to be this way. I still am this way a little bit, but not much. Where I go, you'll say, Kurt, did you get this done? I'll say, well, Steve, I was doing it, and then my dog ate some chocolate, had taken to the vet, and then of course my car ran out of gas, so I had to go get gas. And I have a million excuses about why I didn't get it done. How do you handle people like that?
It's so funny that you say that, because I do have some clients like that, and it literally, again, it's about discipline at the end of the day, right? Those who have ever pledged a fraternity or sorority, you'll know the phrase, excuses are tools of the incompetent. Right. It's one of the first things we're like, excuses are tools of the incompetent. And so for me, when people are making excuses around, it's interesting. There's a couple of aspects to that. I'm kind of doing I'm an abstract thinker, so you're actually watching that happen. So one thing that helps that, and this is going to sound kind of funky, but it's the real truth to it. That's one of the reasons why my clients pay for my services, right? And it's weird. Why do you say that, Steve? And what I mean is, people have to place value on the work they have to do, right? When there's value involved in the work that they have to do day by day, it gets them focused, right? I did real well in school when I had to pay for my own classes. Right? It's funny how focused I became when my parents weren't paying for school anymore. I mean, it was just amazing how I'm sitting in the front of the class because I'm like, wait a minute, I paid X thousands of dollars for this. I'm getting an A out of this class. I don't care what anybody says, right? I'm going to study hard. And so that's one of the reasons why people pay for a life coach. It's because if you see no value in the work, you're not going to do the work. And so the payment isn't really about me having money based on what I'm doing for you. It's about you seeing the value in your day-to-day work, right? And so that's part of the answer, right? That's kind of a funky answer, but it's a real one, right? That's truth to it.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
So absolutely. And so the other part of it is my job as a life coach is to be the facilitator, to be the motivator, right? To be the one that empowers it. That's not something that's unique to any one particular person. We all do that, right? We all get distracted. We all procrastinate. And so what I do is explore where that procrastination is coming from and get them to focus on what's important for their day. It's like, there's a saying, you're going to rule the day or the day's going to rule you.
Right.
And I simply give them some fundamental keys and concepts to think about. Hey, look, because I'm like, hey, listen, it's not my dime. This is your dime. And if this is how you want to spend your money, then I'm not going to fight you on that, right? And you just won't get out of this anything, right? And it's funny because, again, that's the other thing. The amount of work you put into your own development and your own growth is what you get out of it on the back end. And I have that conversation with my clients from the very beginning, right? It really isn't about me. My job is to motivate you, yes, but ultimately the client does the work. And so I just keep them focused on that. And I, one of the things I ask also in the beginning is, what do you want out of this, right? What are you trying to get from me, right? And I remind them of that. When they start saying, well, the car ran out of gas, I said, well, what do you want from me today? Right? What do you want from me? Because I can tell you the same thing. I have a life too. I can tell you, hey, listen, I ran out of gas. I couldn't get to the Zoom call today. I'm sorry. Would that be okay for you?
Exactly.
And all of a sudden they'd be like, no, that wouldn't work for me. But hey, there you go, right? That doesn't work for me either as your life coach, right? And sometimes as a coach, you have to kind of, you got to give them a little, proverbial smack, to let them know on the butt, just, hey, that doesn't work for me. Just like, if I gave that excuse to you, it wouldn't work for you. And so we work together as a team. And ultimately, I get a great client and they get great results. And that's what I just keep them focused on. And of course, there are specifics to that, but I don't want to take all your time talking about that because that would take all day. We could literally lay that out. But yeah, but that's really it.
Do you know who Gary Vaynerchuk is?
I'm not familiar, no.
Okay, he's a self-help guru. He's one of the most popular ones right now, the marketing guru. He's really great at knowing what all the social media things are for and how to advertise on them. Like he's got it down to a science, and he's really good. Okay. And he gives so much free advice. And he said, he goes, I don't worry about it, you doing anything with it, because I know you won't. He goes, I'm going to give this to you, and maybe 1 out of 1 million will do something with the advice I give you. And it's to your point that there has to be a value there. And when something's given for free, people don't perceive a value to it. And so they don't do anything with it. So unless they're paying for it, unless they have some skin in the game, as we say, they don't do anything with it. And so, I've been a personal trainer most of my adult life. And I've taught, and what I do is I teach my clients how to train without me. Like they could become personal trainers themselves when I'm done with them, but they stay with me, not because they need me anymore, because they want me. And there's a difference. I always tell people, you don't want someone to want you because, or want to be with you because they need you. You want them to be with you because they want you, because they
Yes.
appreciate you.
Yeah.
And so when you pay for something like your course, it adds value to what they're doing, as you said. And if they don't, and they if you just told everybody how to do everything for free right now, I guarantee you you'd be lucky if you get one person who followed your advice and actually took
Right.
it. You know,
That's
so
right. That's
it's
right.
important that people understand that in that it's, you've got to, as you said earlier, if it's free, you just don't appreciate it as much as,
Yeah.
school. When your parents were paying for school, yeah, you didn't appreciate as much as when it came out of your pocket.
That's right. That's right. And it's funny that you brought up school again, because I'm a graduate. My undergrad, I went to City College in New York, right? Got my BA in history there. And the crazy thing about that was I discovered that CCNY at one point was completely free to the public. And guess what? They couldn't fill their classrooms. They couldn't
Really?
fill their classrooms. People just didn't want to go because
This is
they didn't perceive it as having that. That was fascinating to me. A free college, and they didn't want to go. And it wasn't until they started charging students that all of a sudden they're filling their classroom. It's just the way we're wired. It's really weird that we're wired that way. But we really place value on how much we have to give up for it. Right. And so, yeah, I wish it was free when I was going, because I would have taken it out with free. I ain't gonna lie to you.
well,
I would have had no problem with it.
I'm going to get off topic here just for a second. It's related, but it's going to be a little off topic here. This is why, I think these younger generations who believe somehow that socialism is the greatest thing ever, and that people, just because they were born, deserve certain things for free. And I go, you don't take into account what it does to a person mentally, the self-worth that they lack, the self-esteem that they lack, that because everything's taken care of. You don't build self-esteem and you don't build self-worth by having other people do things for you. So when they talk about free college, I go, I'm about college, that it should be accessible to people, but there has to be something. And I'm not saying money necessarily. Maybe you have to give a year of your life to service, in the civil
Yes.
sector or something like that. And the same
Yes.
way with free healthcare. I don't believe in free healthcare. What I believe is that healthcare should be accessible to everyone, but you have to take responsibility for your own health. If the doctor says you have diabetes, or you have a heart disease, or you have this or that, you need to quit smoking, you need to quit eating junk food, you need to start exercising, and you're not willing to do that, then if you're not willing to take care of yourself, why should everybody else take care of you? And I think that, and until we put responsibility on people to take care of themselves and to put something into the game, to put some skin in the game, they're not going to appreciate it. And like you said, where that school couldn't even fill the seats. It's like,
Yeah.
that's crazy. And I know
Yeah.
that some
It
people
really
out there,
is.
like you and me, go, yeah, I wish school was free. I would have been there.
Yeah. 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 And it's funny because I'm glad you brought that up, because we do have some differences of opinion on that, which I think is a good thing, because I
Right.
think these are the conversations that we have to have as a country, particularly right now. I think in the environment that we're having right now, politically, socially, culturally, et cetera, these are the sort of conversations where even if we disagree, we have open and honest conversation about it. I do believe in free education. And here's why. For me, and again, it's interesting. I actually studied. I was blessed to study as Malik Shabazz Human Rights Institute scholar at the City College of New York. I went to Geneva to study at the UN there, and I got a really interesting look at the US from the perspective of the rest of the world, particularly as it relates to government structuring, and role of government, right? And things like education, healthcare, all that stuff obviously is part of that conversation, right? And it's interesting, for first countries around the world, they see free healthcare as a universal right, right? Like a birthright, literally, of being a human being. and as first I'll start with education. I think education for free is really more about the impact it has on the country as a whole. Because the more educated the population is, the more we all are uplifted, right? Like it's kind of like, it's like waters rising, it raises all the boats, right? Not just one. And that's just how I think of it. I think of it in terms of the fact that if we invest in our youth around the country, irrespective of where they are or their cultural background or their skin color, if we invest in all of our youth in this country and give them education. And it's funny because I agree with you. I don't disagree that maybe there's some responsibility on the back end. Maybe they do a year or two in service in the community or to service in the industry or something like that, that they do their major in, right? I have no problem with that at all. And it's funny, maybe that's the compromise where you have free education, but on the back end of it, there's work. Like for instance, if you get a free education through the military, you have to give 5 years, right? 4 years. You have to give years, right? After you're done. And that's the price you pay. Your school was completely free, but you do have to spend time in the military, right? And I think you can do the same with other industries, right? But if you make it free, then all of a sudden you start seeing a real positive impact on communities around the country. And part of, I think, the challenge is not all people think in terms of what's good for them is good for me. Right? We don't think in those terms, or I don't care if I'm good and they're not, right? Like people think in those terms, and the only real way to get past that, I think, is to have these kind of conversations to open people's eyes to understand that if you raise up these neighborhoods in Brooklyn and the Bronx and Detroit and LA, if you make those neighborhoods better, the whole country benefits, right? And we could spend time on that, but getting people to see, if you raise up these rural areas in Idaho, right, in Utah, right, in North Carolina, if you really raise up these farmers and make their lives better and invest in them, then the whole country benefits, right? And so it's just a matter of, I think, how we think of ourselves, because the question isn't just who am I? From the national perspective, the question is, who are we? And it's funny, we're having a big argument about that, right? This very day, right? Who are we, right? Like, what does that even mean to be an American, right? And it's funny how your perspective changes when you go outside of the country, right? Like, just having a conversation here in America, I would, people are like forcing me to say, well, I'm African-American, right? If I say I'm American, there are people look at me like they don't even believe I'm American, right? Just looking at me. But when I go to France or Geneva, it doesn't make sense to say, it's just, I'm American, right? And they're, oh yeah, okay, I get it, you're American, right? I could tell by your accent, right? You're American, right? And there it is, right? Now, as far as healthcare, it's interesting because I actually have done work I actually was a trainer in MedStar Health system, like a hospital system in the DMV area, where we did training around things like change management, leadership development, that sort of thing. And so I have a lot of background and history and interest in the healthcare field. And they're undergoing a lot of changes right now that they're really struggling with, and just in terms of how they see the patient as the center of their care. And for me, I also believe that free healthcare is a birthright of being a human being. It's just my belief, how I see it, right? And I think it's just a matter of my perspective of the patient. Now, again, I liked the idea that you had of having the responsibility for how you take care of yourself. I don't see a reason why that can't be part of free healthcare, right? I don't think it's either or. And I think that's where we get caught up. We get so caught in this, I'm right and you're wrong. We forget that the real answer typically is this and that, right? Not this or that. And so it can be something like free healthcare is universal for all. However, maybe there are some expectations that are placed around how we take care of our own health, right? But again, that also digs into the disparities in wealth from community to community, where if I'm struggling just to make ends meet and survive, I I can't worry about whether or not I'm eating fried foods because I'm just eating whatever the heck I can, right? And I can't worry about what impact that has on my health because I'm just trying to make it. That's the other thing that I think people don't think of is how interconnected these issues are, right?
Right.
Because when you start talking about free healthcare, you're also talking about why free healthcare matters. And you start talking about why there's disparities in healthcare. And you start talking about why there are disparities in how people even look at their own health, right? There's somebody who, who lives a healthy lifestyle, more power to them, and then they're dead at 39. Right. It happens, right? You have people who don't even think about, their diet. And then there's even the cultural aspect of that as well, right? Being an African American, I can tell you there are some serious cultural aspects to how we eat in the African American community that's rooted, deeply rooted in our history in this country, right? We're talking about, slaves that were forced to eat pig entrails,
Right.
right? And pig's feet and heads and ears and stuff like that. And, that's because that's what, their masters didn't eat. And that became, power to us, we made that a delicacy and we survived off that. But it has had serious health implications. And you see that in distinctions in healthcare, even amongst people of color and white people in this country. And so those are all the conversations you have to have if you're going to bring that up. And then the question is, do we listen to each other? And then do we find the this and that answer?
Right. And I think, and there, you do have a point because especially when it comes to diet, there's so many theories out there as far as diet goes. But, for me, I've pretty much, again, because this is my field, I have gone through the different diets. I've examined and done the research of different, and I don't mean just Googled it. I actually did the research on what diets are healthy. What's that?
I said, the nerve of you doing real research.
But I found that there's a fallacy that people believe that in order to eat healthy, it costs more. And I'm telling you now, I have found many ways that people can eat healthy and it can actually cost less. But you touched on something, especially culturally. When people have, certain foods that they've been eating in their families for decades or not centuries, it's hard to get them away from those foods. I can tell you white Southerners, not that I'm a white Southerner, but white Southerners love their sweet tea. There's enough sugar in there to give you diabetes in one glass. It's like,
absolutely.
And yet,
that's right.
If you try to even, say, hey, why don't you take just regular tea and maybe put a little Splenda in there? They would like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, right. Take you off my land. Get out of here.
Exactly.
Right.
So there has to be some sort of shift in the mindset to go, look, I know this is the way I used to eat, but in order for me to stay healthy and to live longer and have a quality life, I need to eat better, and we need to find ways to do that. And there are ways to actually do that. As far as yeah, I agree with you. I'm probably 99% of everything that you just said on healthcare and on schooling. In fact, I made the argument that if we had free college, it would actually cost less, because here's the thing. A lot of kids are going to college not because they care to go to college or get a degree or find a career, but because they can borrow all this money that they can spend. And that's what they're doing. And they're going into debt, not thinking about, because it's the same way. This is why, and I've talked about this before in other episodes. When you go to spring break in Daytona, what the biggest tents they have out there are credit card companies who are giving these kids credit cards left and right. I mean, you put your name and Social Security down, bam, you don't even have to have a job. Here's your credit card. And they get them in debt from the very beginning and teach them how to stay in debt their whole lives. And I said, and this is what's happening with college loans. These kids they're spending this money not wisely, and they're going to end up in debt for the rest of their lives. I said, but what happens if they don't get that money? What if college is free and there's no longer money that's given to them? Now The only ones who are going to go to college are the ones who really want to go to college. The other ones may go to trade schools or whatever, and that's great because we need people who and there are people out there who don't want to go to college, who enjoy being a mechanic or whatever. So, and so and I'll tell you, some of those trade jobs will make you a millionaire as well. I know a plumber who's on Martha's Vineyard. He was the youngest plumber on Martha's Vineyard, and he became a millionaire being the plumber on Martha's Vineyard.
So. Right, and you make a great point. College isn't for everyone, right? Just because college is free doesn't mean everyone should go. If you don't want to go, it's not that college is free. I think you make a great point with that, and that's something else that we don't talk enough about. There was a time when industry guilds were huge. Right, stonemasonry, right? Those sorts of things were huge. You still see it some in construction, but that could be something that we build in terms of country infrastructure, where we start building our guilds back up. For people that don't want to go to college, it's still, you get your education, you wind up going, in construction, they still do that, where you go through training, right, as an apprentice, and you learn, you start sweeping floors and cleaning up, and then you start learning different crafts and different trades, working with stone and brick and all that stuff, and you can build a great career, that way. So all of that, I think, is on the table when we start talking about free education. I think all of that is on the table, making those guilds free, because that can be really, that could be expensive. So finding ways to make that accessible for people who don't have hope, to do those sorts of things, because they don't have money, right? And again, that's not about making us a socialist country or a communist country. It's just about understanding that if you positively impact fellow Americans, we all see the benefits, because those young men and women who are going into the guilds, they wind up doing the work that's very necessary for us to survive on.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, and I wanted to make this point. I'm glad you said that, because it just jarred my memory or something I wanted to tell you. One of the biggest issues, and again, I'm generalizing here, but my experience is that baby boomers, and who I happen to be one of them, they are so self-centered and selfish that they, they're concerned about, I don't want to pay any more taxes. They don't care whether the roads and bridges are falling apart. They don't care if schools are falling apart. They it doesn't benefit me, because I'm not going to be around long enough to appreciate these things. It's like, how self-centered that is, that you're not thinking about what kind of world you're going to leave for these kids. And I have such a problem with that when they think, and again, it's not all baby boomers, but it's a great deal of them that I've seen. And I go, it's such a selfish way to look at things. It's like, I don't care what benefits you, I care what benefits me. And that hurts us as a country.
Very much.
Yeah.
First of all, I can't believe you're a baby boomer, man. There's no way in the world you're a baby boomer.
Yeah.
No way.
I am.
I don't believe it. Because I'm a Generation Xer. I thought maybe you were Generation X, but
really?
There's no way you're a baby boomer. You carry it well, man. I'll tell you that. You definitely carry it well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're very kind. You're like my top three. You're up there like me.
I love it. There you go. I don't have a problem with that. I still can't believe I'm part of Generation X, man.
I know.
I'm counting several generations behind me now. I'm like, wait a minute. How did that happen?
I read something by a guy who was in his 80s, and he said one of the things, he goes, that they don't tell you as you get older, he goes, the pains that you feel in your 50s, he goes, they're still with you in the 80s, they just hurt more. he goes, and they don't tell you this. He goes, the days get longer, but the years get shorter. And I was like, wow,
yes, sir.
that is exactly right. And
yes, sir. And the nights get shorter too, because you're waking up all night.
Right.
That's a whole nother conversation, man. We can do a whole new show about that one, boy.
I remember when I could sleep 18 hours straight. Now I'll be lucky if I could sleep 6 hours straight.
Right. Exactly.
So let's get back into what you do here, and thanks for going off on that little tangent with me. I enjoy doing that time to time. What were you doing before? Like you said, you were a history major. What got you into this line of work?
Wow, that's a loaded question, man, Kurt, because a lot of people can't hear this, but I'll just be transparent here. I mentioned that the first question I ask my clients is, who are you, right? The second question I ask them is, to whom do you belong?
Mm.
And that has obvious spiritual roots to it, right? So it's fascinating because I'm a Christian, right? But even though I'm a Christian, I've come to understand that as my work as a life coach, um, I have learned that my job is not to judge what other people's spiritual walk is. They may not even have one. That's not what's important for me as a life coach. What's important for me as a life coach is, can my client articulate, can you say what your walk is? Either I don't believe in God, or I'm agnostic, or I'm just not sure. I'm a Christian, or I'm a Muslim. You could say whatever. That's not important for me, right? For the purpose of developing someone. To develop them, they have to be able to articulate what their faith walk is. And the important thing then is, what does that faith walk teach them about how to treat others? Because if you look at all the major religions, they all teach very similar things about how we're supposed to treat one another, right? Which is really funny that we argue amongst each other all the time. And we forget that fundamental tenet that we're supposed to treat each other with love, honor, respect, and dignity, right? I said all that to say that what got me here ultimately was, I had a series of dreams, right, about my purpose and about what I'm here to do, that I'm here to help people, right? And that there's a lot of power in the work that I will do, right? And brother, I'm telling you, I ran from that for years. I ran from that for years. Like I was one of those people stuck in, well, I'm just going to make some money, and I'm just going to have a job, I'm going to make some money. And again, I did some great work. I wound up, I was a trainer for a job readiness program that actually started me in doing public speaking. And I discovered that I had the skill for getting people to think about things, right? In ways they wouldn't normally, right? Because I was a job readiness trainer. But I was just doing that job because it paid bills. That was the only reason why I did it, right? And I went from there to, now the fascinating thing there was, I actually, 60 Minutes did a segment on our agency. And I was in that 60 Minutes piece for a total of about 2 minutes out of the 20-minute piece. And in that 2 minutes I was on there, it turned out a producer out in Hollywood saw me, spent about 5 months trying to find me. And if you can imagine, I'm literally sitting at my job one day in Harlem, right? They say, Steve, there's a phone call for you. And, I'm on the phone, and she goes, listen, I saw you on television and you just popped, your energy, your enthusiasm, the way you interacted with those clients. It was amazing. She was like, have you ever thought about doing a talk show? And I'm sitting here at my desk at work, no, right? No, I never thought of that. And she said, I really think you should come out here. Let's pitch to some studios. And we did. And I actually we wound up pitching to King World. King World actually signed me first. And we just sat for a year. And then I wound up signing with Disney. We actually got to the point where we did a talk show pilot with Disney. And the pilot got dropped because the executives who had greenlighted the pilot actually got canned right before we sold it to the studios.
Man.
And so, but that's the story, right, of a lot of people in media, right? And so but the blessing was, and it's funny that this roundabout story really is the roundabout story about how I got here, right? But the blessing was that one of the producers there also worked for BET. And with Tavis Smiley, who was the host of BET Tonight, actually left them in a contract dispute, one of the producers with the BET said, you really need to check this guy, Steve Berlack, out. This guy is he's good, right? And so I wound up going to New York. I spoke with the producer. He was like, yeah, we'll do a show with you and see how you do. And I wound up doing 12 shows, hosting BET Tonight on national television. Who does this stuff, right? Who lives this life, right? And they wound up hiring Ed Gordon, who was the previous host before. And that's the business, right? They wanted to go with a more familiar name, that kind of thing. But in the meantime, I got all this experience, doing training as a media host. And I was on live television, doing live TV. And then ultimately, I got my master's in education at Morgan State. It was a free program, right? And I went, I said, because I made a promise that I wanted to get as high as I could in my education. That was always something that was important to me. My grandparents, who I grew up with, had not finished high school. And that was always something that they talked to me about from the time I was a kid. And so I was determined, right, to go as high as I could. Got my master's in education at Morgan State University, became a teacher there, and in public school system in Baltimore, and then became an administrator. And so here's where it gets to full circle of where I'm doing now. I love teaching. I loved helping kids, and in particular, I loved helping their parents in the community. But the higher I went up in as an administrator, the more I realized the politics involved, and I was stymied. I couldn't do I couldn't have the impact I really wanted to have because I wasn't allowed to, right? I couldn't teach what I wanted to. I taught history, right? I love history. So I would teach history. And, but I wasn't allowed to teach what I wanted to teach, right?
Right.
Particularly and it's funny, one of the first questions I would ask my students is whether they were Black, white, Latino, whatever, Asian. I was, do you understand that you have a Black male teaching you United States history and what that means? Like, that would be the first conversation I would have, right? That's nowhere in the curriculum, right? And so, those sorts of things as a teacher get you in trouble, right? And I realized I'm not having the impact I really want to have on the people around me. And that ultimately led me, along with the dreams that I had about that, to actually create the Berlack method, the company. And then from that, I created Broadcaster Inner Champion. Because I realized years before, somebody had asked me, what do you talk about? And I'd never really thought about what I talked about. And it was out of that question that I started creating Broadcaster Inner Champion, because I'm like, well, what is important to me? If I had a mic right here in front of me and I had the entire world and I wanted to say what I needed to say, what would I tell them? And Broadcaster Inner Champion was born from that. And I literally took a leap of faith. I left my job. I was making great money at Baltimore City Public Schools, but I was miserable. And forgive me, you hear in the background, that's my boy Koba, the pit bull. He's just having a time over here in the corner. Just act like you don't hear him. And so I realized I was chasing paychecks and not chasing my passion. And so I created Broadcaster Inner Champion out of that question: what do I want to say if I had a mic? And that question, that what I wanted to say is, the way that you become successful in life isn't about your skills. It's not about what job you have. It's not about doing what everybody told you is the right thing to do. Being successful is about fully answering the question who you are and to who you belong. And when you answer those questions, things like your career, the right career to have, your relationships, the people you allow in your circle, all of those things fall into place, and you live a happy, healthy, well-filled life when you answer those questions and you live your life that way and you become organized with your goals. And so that's actually, it's a long-winded answer, but that's ultimately how I got here.
That's an amazing story, honestly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Inspiring.
Thank you.
Because when you do what you do, when I do what I do, it's because of things that have happened in our lives that have brought us to this point. And I think that's the experience that we have. It's not just our knowledge; it's the experiences that we've gone through that give us that ability to help others. And I don't think if you had not had the experiences you had, that you would be able to help people the way that you do. So, so there should be a lot of importance put on experience that people have, because it makes them who they are. And it's from that we learn, is through our experiences. So
Kurt, if I can, man, you just brought something up for me just to make this more real for folks, right? I was born in the South Bronx to an 18-year-old mother, right? Single. My dad was killed when I was 7 months old in Vietnam. I never met the man. He was killed before I ever got to meet him. I was a Black kid in the South Bronx, born to a single mother. So by definition, I'm a bastard, right? born in 1965. So we're talking about, I grew up in the 70s in the Bronx. And if anybody knows New York in the 70s, like burnt out blocks, right? It was called the Burning Bronx, actually, at the time I grew up there. And if anybody were to look at me at 5 years old and say, well, what's his chances in life? They would be like, this kid doesn't have a chance and to be successful at all. And I realized that to the degree that I can be called successful, it is because I had to answer those questions and I had to go through some real stuff, right? I've been homeless. With my master's degree and all of that, right? I've actually been to the point where I actually walked out the door and to go to my car to get somewhere, and my car is gone. And I knew that my car wasn't stolen. My car was gone because it was repossessed, because I couldn't afford to pay it. Like, I've been there. I've experienced that. And even though I am this kid from the South Bronx who was a bastard child, and people can look at me and not expect anything. And even though I have gone through my trials and tribulations, I still fought through it. I'm still successful. And it's all because I know who I am. And just to make it even more real, my name is Stephen, right? Stephen actually means crowned one. So I conduct myself as if I'm royal, even though I'm a bastard child of this young Black mother in the Bronx, right? My middle name, Bernard, means strong, brave bear. I am strong, I'm brave. I can handle anything that comes my way. My name, Berlack, is actually a Prussian Jewish name. My great-great-grandfather was a Prussian Jew. Go figure.
Really?
Right? Go figure. Right? And my knowledge of that, my understanding of that means that I am connected to people in a way that most people just aren't conscious of, right? There's a Steve Berlack right now, right, who's part of that side of the family, who, if I was to walk with him in the street, people would think we'd have nothing in common, but he is family, right? And understanding my name, Berlack, this is what I mean about knowing who you are, understanding what Berlack means, understanding the connections culturally, linguistically, understanding all of that means it doesn't matter what comes my way. I can overcome it. And that's what I teach my clients, right? That everything begins with this fundamental knowledge. And when they come at me and say, oh, I'm just tired of my career, I got this wife and I can't stand her, she gets on my nerves. And I'm like, yeah, okay, hear you. Let's do some of the fundamental work first. Why did you even marry this woman? Why did you connect with her? What is the connection? And did you connect with her before you knew who you were? And maybe that's the problem. Absolutely. Right? Maybe that's the issue, right? You're saying it's all her fault, but maybe you don't even know who you are, right? And just having those sorts of conversations makes it very real. And the fascinating thing about it is, Kurt, it's because of those challenges. That's why I'm good as a life coach. Like all the accolade, like all the positive things I did, people don't really care. That's the crazy thing. My clients couldn't care less that I have a master's degree. Like, they don't care about that.
Right.
But when they understand that I've been homeless, when they understand that, I've gone through these trials and tribulations, when I tell them that I know what it's like to have roaches falling from the ceiling where I'm at, all of a sudden they're like, okay, wait a minute, maybe he can tell me something, right? It's really amazing how that works, but I've discovered that to be true, and I have been blessed to go through that crap.
Well, so I'm going to give you a compliment in a roundabout way. So I'm going to say this: you are the problem for a lot of people, and here's why. You're a shining example of what you can do when you have the right mindset. No matter what your environment, you rise up out of the environment that you were in and make more of yourself. I think the challenge is that what I see is that not everybody has that in them. There are people out there like you who are exceptions to the rule, who can, I feel like I'm that person. I rose up out of my environment as well. I was the only white person I knew, other than my neighbors, who actually lived in the projects. It's like not any of my friends ever lived in the projects, and so and of course they were the white projects, because back in the 70s there were, the railroad track separated the black project and the white projects. But I came from that environment, and I could have very easily stayed in that environment, but I didn't. But I never judge people and say, Well, do like I did, pull yourself up by your bootstraps,
Wow.
and, because not everybody has that mindset, not everyone has that ability. So how do we reach those people that don't have that mindset, or can we, or are they just are they always going to be a victim of their environment and their upbringing?
Great question. For me, it's story. And it's funny, I know this is the work that Robert really helps people do. It's understanding your story and listening to the stories of others and making the connection, right? Um, Thank you for the compliment, by the way. And what I would say is, I'm no smarter than anyone else. But I'm aware of why I've become so self-aware, right? And it isn't because I just woke up one day and I just became self-aware. It's because I had the right support systems. I had the right people around me. And see, I hope somebody listening heard that.
I do,
I really hope that
I
struck
just
somebody today.
it struck me because I go, you just answered it. You just
Yep.
answered the question. If you
Yep.
don't have the support system, because I don't know what your mother was like. I'm assuming she must have been very supportive and there for you. Um, and I had a mother like that. And I think those are the reasons why we were able to come up out of this. And if you
Yes.
don't have that support system, go find that support system.
Yes.
You
Yes.
answered the question, Steve.
Yes. And I, as a life coach, am that support system for my
Right.
clients. If you have not had that, then that's what I do. I am your support system. I'm the one with that knowledge and background who has gotten that from others. And I do what's called broadcasting my inner champion. When I broadcast my inner champion, when I tell you my stories, what I've been through, then I'm helping you and I'm being that support system for you. I will be that support for you. That's what I do for my clients. And, just to really, if I can, this really explains it. Um, I remember, again, growing up in the Bronx, I actually I fell into this peer pressure. I had some friends who were like, yeah, let's go to the corner store. We're going to take some stuff from there. I didn't want to do it. Right. And they were like, no, come on, man, let's go. We're going to take some food. We're hungry. And I went into the store. Right. And I stole a bag of potato chips. Right. And I had them like under my coat. And I had to look like I didn't want to do it, right? I had this look
Right.
on my face. And of course, this is my neighborhood store. The guy knew me. He saw the look on my face. And of course, he busted me, right? And he tells my mom. And the first thing my mom did, if anybody has old school moms like or parents like my mom, first thing she did was whip mama behind, right?
Right.
She whipped mama behind. Now, that was the first thing she did. Now, here's the crazy thing. I actually don't remember the butt whip, right? I had plenty from her, so I don't remember them all. But
Right.
the second thing she did was she told every single person in my family what I did, right? She was like, let me tell you what this boy did. This person, the guy embarrassed me, right? Not that I did anything to me, right? He embarrassed me, trying to take stuff and this stuff, right? So first thing she did was tell her parents, right? The grandparents that I grew up with. The next time I go over to my grandparents' house, grandma just says hi, right? And grandpa says, come with me, son. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go, right? Here we go. Now, if you know my grandfather was that type of dude that would tell you to pull his finger, right? And when you pull his finger, you know what happened next,
Right.
right? Like, that's grandpa, right? He was very happy-go-lucky. He was the type, always had a joke, always smiling and laughing, right? But here's the type of support I got from him that turned my life around. He brought me into the bedroom. I'll never forget it. I mean, we're talking, this is decades ago, man, but I remember it like it was yesterday. He brings me into the bedroom. He sits me down in the bed. He said, look, son, he said, it starts with this. He put them like a pencil. He put it down on the table. He said, next thing you know, it'll be this. And he picked up like a tissue box and put it next to the pencil. So just something bigger than the pencil. He said, next thing you know, it'll be this. And he picks up this lamp, something bigger than the tissue box, puts it next to the tissue box. And then he looked at me and he said the next line that I never forgot in my life. You know what he said? He said, Berlacks don't do that.
Wow.
Simple. Plain out. Berlacks don't do that. He then went on to explain to me the life that he lived as a private detective in New York for 28 years and the work that he did in law enforcement and his son, my uncle, being a court officer and how Berlacks were always on the right side of the law, right? And it's just a matter of code. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. That's what we do. We always do the right thing. He never raised his voice, never argued. He just said that. And then guess what he did? He turned on his heel, walked out the door, never mentioned it to me again. And I never forgot it. And from that point on, anytime anybody tried to steer me out of my natural self, I just told them, and it's as corny as it may have sounded to them, Berlacks don't do that.
No,
I just don't do that.
those are the most empowered lessons that you will ever learn. It's never like you said, you get whooped so much you don't even remember whoopings anymore. But when someone that you love and respect gives you a message like that, it's so powerful that you can't forget that.
That's right.
Oh man, what a great story. I mean,
yeah, thank you. And that's what I do for my clients. I give them what my grandfather gave me.
Folks, if that don't make you sign up with this man, I don't know what will. It's like, honest to goodness, man, I want to sign up. I was like, that was such a great story. Like, Berlack, don't do that. I
won't do it.
Man.
Yes, sir. And it's real, and it's 100% real. That's it in a nutshell. No salt, no pepper. That's just it, straight up.
Yeah, and again, that's the most. I remember my mom, and I love my mom dearly. Like, she was such a great mother, and she was so supportive. But my mom was, old school. She believed in spanking, and I'm not talking about abuse, because I know a lot of people think, oh, if you spank your child, you're abusing. No, you're not. I mean, I don't necessarily believe in spankings to, like that they're needed as much as I got them.
Right.
You know what? I very seldom did anything that my parents didn't want me to do.
So, right. There you go.
I don't know if you remember. Did you ever have hot rod tracks? Like the
yes,
hot rod
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, those
sting.
Did your mom know my mom? Is that what this is? Like, are they related? Like,
I am telling you.
Do they know each other?
I'm telling you now. I have been, because of being poor and stuff, I had a lot of Black friends, and I was invited. Like, I would always be over their house, and in my neighborhood, or with my mom, it didn't matter who it was. If my friend's mother told me, boy, you better sit down, I had better sit down, because if she tells my mom I didn't sit down, my mom, and she would tell her, if he don't sit down and obey you, you can smack him just like you do your own kids. And so that's the kind of environment we had, where we had respect for everybody. And I looked at them as my mothers as well. And my mother, like, they were like, went hand in hand in how they raised their kids. And, I remember, I remember hearing one of the mothers say, son, if you don't knock that, I'm going to smack the black off of you. Well, I swear my mother told me she was going to smack the white off of me one time. And I was like, what?
What? That's hilarious.
Exactly.
I love it.
But
I love it. I'm picturing you right now, checking in the mirror, like, how would that even work? Exactly. What would that look like?
It was funny because my brother and I, we hid all the hot rod tracks. And so,
oh my God, you did that too? We are related, brother. I'm telling you, man.
My mom asked us one Christmas, before Christmas, she goes, oh, do y'all want some hot rod tracks for Christmas? We're like, nope.
No, thank you. I love it, man. That's how you do it right there. That's because you're smart. Ain't nothing wrong with being smart, man.
I don't know if you remember Bill Cosby back in the day. His stand-up comedy, he had an album out, and it was an album I had. And he was telling a joke about how his mama would tell him to go out and get a switch. Go get a switch off that tree. And he would come back with this little thing. She goes, don't make me go out and get it. Because I remember as a kid, I did the exact same thing. Go get me a switch. I come back with this little thing.
Right. You didn't say what size. Right. Exactly. You didn't say nothing about the size.
Exactly.
Right. And they come back with like a whole tree. With your behind with.
Now, folks, if you didn't have parents like us, Steve will be that parent for you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got trees in my backyard. I have no problem with that. Absolutely. I'll introduce you. Every tree in there.
Exactly.
That's right. Figuratively, though, right?
Right, figuratively. I think you go to jail for that kind of stuff nowadays.
Yeah. I don't think you're supposed to do that as a life coach. Right? Is this supposed to hurt when you do like those?
I can see the hand goes behind your back going, he paid me to do it.
Right. Hey, man. Hey, listen. Hey, knowledge hurts. We're speaking figuratively, folks.
Right, exactly. Well, Steve, I'm telling you, I had a great time with you. So let people know where they can find you and how to get in touch with you when they understand that they need that support system that you can be for them.
Yeah, absolutely. By all means. So my website is steveberlack.com, SteveBerlack.com. Now, I'm actually in the process of transferring my website host. So it's not up right now. It's just down temporarily, but it'll be back up. In the meantime, just all you have to do is Google the Berlack method. Just Google it and you'll see all the information that will pop up, right? Like how to contact me. You'll see information about my modules for Broadcasting Your Champion at both 101 and 201. And you'll find out my phone number. You can contact me directly and you can email me as well. That's not a problem at all. You also can find me on Facebook, Steve Berlack. You'll find me on IG at @sberlack and on Twitter at @sberlack and LinkedIn, Steve Berlack. So by all means, feel free to connect with me on social media. You can IM me there as well. And I give a complimentary 1-hour strategy session. So if you even are thinking about working with me, by all means, all you have to do is connect with me either on social media or you can connect with me right now on just Google the Berlack method. And you can call and you'll get a free 1-hour session with me just so we can see the fit and see whether or not I can help you get to the success that you deserve.
That's great. One more thing I want to bring up since you had brought up your social media. One of the reasons why I think what you do is so important is because nowadays people get wrapped up in social media and the whole influencer thing and the whole, putting on these airs about yourself. I know a kid he was 20 or 21 years old. He came and fixed my air conditioner. This guy making 6 figures a year, and he's 20, 21 years old. But he said, girls won't give him the time of day because of what he does. It's like,
wow.
because they're so wrapped up in this image of, oh, you have to have a certain job or you have to go to a certain school or you have to drive a certain car. And I think that if for people like him, even though he's successful monetarily, I think even he could benefit from you to go, you need to know who you are so that if you meet these people who are just, there's nothing to them, there's no substance to them, they're shallow, you don't need those people. That's not who you want in life. So I think even those people could benefit from.
Absolutely. Because I hear him crying out, man. I've experienced that. I know what that's like. I would tell him right off the bat, man, it's just, those are the wrong people for you. Don't worry about that. They may look attractive. They may have fabulous bodies, these girls that are rejecting you. They may have great minds, but that doesn't mean that they're the right person for you. Don't worry about them because the right one is coming. Right, the right one is coming because she's going to see you. It's going to happen naturally. She's going to see you. Right. I tell people all the time, you either see me or you don't. And that's not about me. That's about you. If you don't see me, that's your problem. Because I'm already broadcasting my inner champion. I'm shining my light. And if you can't see it, I don't care. And it's funny. It doesn't matter what your title is either. You can be family or friend. I don't care. If you can't see me, you get the boot.
Exactly. I agree with you. That don't get you anywhere. It's like
that's right.
If you're not a good person, it don't matter who you are. So, someone said this a long time ago, and I kept this because I love the saying. It's like, if you're a 10 on the outside and you're a 2 on the inside, you're a 2.
That's right. A pure 2. Right. That's exactly. Right. No additives, no subtractions. You're a pure 2. Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
If once we understand that, you get past the outside and you realize that person's shallow, that's not who you want in your life. That's not who you want to spend your life with, because it just brings.
There's a great movie about that too. If you ever seen Shallow Hal, that's like
yeah.
Exactly. Oh my God, that movie is so funny. And it really shows like the idea of what you're talking about there.
Right.
Yeah. I'm a big movie buff if you couldn't tell. I love movies.
Okay. What's your do you have a number one movie of all time?
I do,
The greatest movie of all
actually.
time.
It's funny. My favorite movie of all time is oh my gosh, I'm sitting here having a brain cramp. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing. See, this is what happens when you get older, folks.
Right.
You see this? Do you see this? This is what happens, man. You start saying, yeah, I know what my favorite movie is, and just stare at the screen, and you go, right, bro. There you go. See, that's what I'm saying.
This is called what's it called? It's called Only for Men Only.
I love it. For men, yeah. I love it.
See, I even forgot the name of that. So.
It's actually a coming of age movie. Where this kid comes from the South out to LA, and The Wood. It's a movie called The Wood. That is my favorite all-time movie. Go check it out, Kurt. You would love it. It's a coming of age movie. This kid comes from the South, grows up in LA like the early 80s, mid 80s, early 90s, and what it was like for him as a kid growing up, and the friends that he has from all the way from like grade school all the way to life. And the present day is actually a wedding. One of them is getting married, and they're all reminiscing about growing up together and what it was like and what it means now that one of them is getting married and that sort of thing. And the music, the soundtrack, the friendships, all of that really strikes me. It makes me think about the people that are close to me, and why they're so close to me. Because those people are rare. Those folks that are in your life, for your life, those folks are very rare. And this movie explores that. It's my favorite movie, The Wood.
You make my choices seem shallow now. Anybody in the movie that we would know that's in The Wood? Any actors that we would know?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Omar Epps is in The Wood. Who else is in The Wood? Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. Is it Omar? Oh, see, no, yeah. Oh my God, what is going on with me? There's quite a few. So now Lathan is in The Wood. And there's a few actors that are in The Wood that you would know, that you would recognize, because there actually was this neoclassical, like R&B, neo, like black movie renaissance that happened like in the 80s, 90s. And they were all part of that. Nia Long is probably the one I remember the most. It wasn't Omar Epps. It wasn't Omar Epps. Oh my God. Folks, you're watching me having a senior moment, right on the show.
They watch me every week have one of those words. So I go,
you do know I'm gonna have to go right after this and go watch The Wood again, right? And like look at the cast list. This is so freaking funny, folks. This is hilarious. This is why I tell you, man. It's all real, man. I'm human like everybody else. This is a senior moment.
Let me tell you something. There's an advantage to this though. As you get older and you forget things, I've read books that I've already read, but I read them like it's the first time I've read them, and I go, "Wow, that's a great story."
Wow, and then a great book.
Right, and then about halfway through, I go, "Wait a minute, I think I've read this book."
Wow, folks, you just gotta love this, man. Just know that this is all part of the natural process. It's all part of that.
It definitely is. It's coming.
This is wisdom you're saying right here. This is wisdom you're saying here.
Well, listen, Steve, it was such a pleasure to have you on. I want to have you on again. We can talk about any, I love having guests on that we could discuss any topic out there and have a good time with.
Yes.
So,
absolutely, man. I love being here. Thank you so much for having me, Kurt, man. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure as well. So, all right, folks. Well, listen, I hope you had as much fun as Steve and I had today because we had a blast.
Yes.
And get a hold of Steve, especially if you're in that situation. Like I said, even if you're even if you're successful monetarily and other things aren't going quite the way you had expected them to go, talk to Steve. It's free. You have nothing to lose. You have everything to gain. So give him a call. All right. So
that's right. That's right.
Time. Stay safe. Take care and love yourself so you can love others. Bye.
Y'all take care.